Hello, chapter 18 is about the structure of main clauses. Hallo, in Abschnitt 18 geht es den Satzbau von Hauptsätzen. Okay, so it's about the sentence structure of main clauses in this chapter. And let's see how we form sentences in German. So usually we start with the subject and then continue with the verb. Now this is a very basic sentence here, where we just have a subject and a verb. So ich esse, which means I eat, du liest, you read, Kerstin tanzt, Kerstin dances. Very simple. So this is, we start with the subject, and then the second position is the verb. In this case here, we have an accusative object, or generally, let's take, it could be also dative object. In this case here, they're just the accusative objects. Ich trinke Tee, I drink tea. Exactly as in the English word order. So it's subject, verb, and then comes the object. Franz isst Spätzle, which means Franz eats Spätzle. Spätzle, a very tasty German dish. You should try if you get the chance. And Laura sieht das Mädchen, which means Laura sees the girl. Okay, so they are all accusative verbs. Whatever we drink is an accusative object, whatever we eat is an accusative object, and whatever we see is, or whoever we see, is an accusative object. This verb here, not to confuse, it is irregular. It comes from the infinitive form essen. Okay, essen means to eat. It is ich esse, but it's du isst und sie es isst. And then wir essen, ihr isst, ihr esst und sie essen. If it has just one s, then it would be sie es isst, which means he, she, it is. Then it comes from the verb to be or sein in German. Okay, not to confuse if there is a double s, you know it's about eat or eating. If it's just one s, and then it comes from the verb sein, which means to be. So if we want to emphasize the object, we can put it at the beginning of the sentence. So you could also say, Tee trinke ich. It's also possible to put it this way. Grammar-wise, it's totally correct. But usually we form the sentences starting with the subject and then the verb. You can put it at the beginning, then comes the verb, always in the second position, and the subject comes then in the end. Very important to keep this in mind. Okay, so first object. So please don't say Tee ich trinke. That would be wrong. That's grammatically, it's not possible in the German language. You have to say Tee trinke ich. Then comes the verb and then the subject. Okay. So then the next slide. Here we have a subject, a verb, an indication of place. Daniel ist in Heidelberg. It means Daniel is in Heidelberg. So usually again, typically we start with the subject and then comes the verb. This is the normal word order in German. Julia fährt nach Hause, Julia drives home, ihr geht in den Park, you're going to the park. Again, if you want to emphasize the location, you can put it at the beginning of the sentence. It's possible, then you would say in Heidelberg ist Daniel. Now we're emphasizing the location, which is Heidelberg here, so we put it at the beginning of the sentence if it's very important to emphasize it, but then please continue with the verb and then comes the subject. I have many students who still confuse that and say in Heidelberg Daniel ist, because usually the word order is subject and then verb if we start with the subject. Okay, but please keep in mind the verb takes always the second position. So it would be wrong to say in Heidelberg Daniel ist. Okay, in Heidelberg ist Daniel. Then in the next example here, we have a subject, verb, indication of time, and indication of place. Whenever we have that, first comes the time, then comes the place. Okay, please keep this in mind. First time, then place. Andreas kocht immer in der Küche. It means Andreas always cooks in the kitchen. And please don't always try to translate it word by word from English to German, or from German to English, because that makes it much more complicated for you. Just should accept the fact that German is just a different language, although there are many similarities between German and English. But you cannot compare it completely with each other. Okay, because in English now it would be Andreas cooks always in the kitchen, which wouldn't sound that well in English. But in German, this is the word order. Okay, subject, verb, then comes the time, and then the location. Stephanie geht manchmal ins Fitnessstudio. It means Stephanie sometimes goes to the gym. Der Mechaniker repariert täglich in der Werkstatt. The mechanic repairs daily in the workshop. This is what that means. So here, if you want to stress out the time or indication of time, you can put it at the beginning. This is what we quite often do, to put the indication of time at the beginning of the sentence. Then it would be immer kocht Andreas in der Küche. Okay, but please keep in mind, as you see here, the verb always takes the second position. So it would be time, verb, then comes the subject, and then the location at the end. Now, if you want to emphasize the location, an indication of place, you can also put it at the beginning of the sentence. So it would be in der Küche kocht Andreas immer. Okay, second position, the verb, then comes always the subject. They belong together, let's say, and then at the end comes the time. Okay, usually, as I said, time and then location if they are right next to each other. Now, if you want to stress out one of both and put it at the beginning, then they have to be around, or like a kind of preget, kind of preget around the verb and the subject. Okay, but in German, as I said, usually we just start with the subject and then the verb. This is a typical word order, how we would form sentences. Then the next example, here we have a subject, a verb, indication of time, and then we have an accusative object here. Ich schreibe immer E-Mails. So in this case, again, you first put the time, then comes the object. This here means I always write emails. Oder jeder feiert jährlich seinen Geburtstag. Everybody celebrates their birthday yearly. Die Schülerin liest jede Woche einen Aufsatz. This female student, right? Because we have the article die and then we have the ending in, so it's the female student, reads an essay every day. Der Aufsatz is the essay. So if you want to stress out the indication of time, you can put it again at the beginning. You see the second position is the verb, then comes the subject, and then comes the accusative object. If you want to stress out the accusative object, or the object in general, could be also the dative object, you put it at the beginning, but then the time comes at the end, because the verb always needs to take the second position, and then comes the subject, if you don't start with the subject. Okay? Then, the next part here, we have a subject, a verb, an indication of time. Sie lernt jetzt, she's studying now. Die Lehrerin kommt morgen. The female teacher comes tomorrow. Again, we have the ending in and the article die, so you know automatically it's about a woman. Then, die Studenten lesen jeden Tag. It means the students read every day. Again, you can put the indication of time at the beginning of the sentence, and then it would be jetzt lernt sie, now she studies. Okay, now let's have a look at the next slide. Here we have a subject, a verb, and then an adjective or adverb or modal. This is how we also call it. Wir joggen schnell, we jog fast. Hans ist langsam, Hans is slow. Die Nachbarin spricht leise, the female neighbor speaks quietly. Okay, so we start with the subject, the verb again, then comes the adjective or adverb. And then here, again, if you want to emphasize the adjective or adverb, you put it at the beginning of the sentence, but then comes the verb, then comes the subject. Schnell joggen wir. You can do this also. So here we have a little bit more complex sentence. We have a subject, we have a verb, we have an indication of time, we have an object, in this case it's a dative object, and then we have an indication of place. The sentence here is Väter spielen häufig mit ihren Kindern auf der Wiese, which means fathers often play with their children on the field. So here, the typical word order would be subject and verb, then time. Whenever you have time, an object, and a location, you have to put the time, the object, and then the location. The word order would be like this. Okay, because time always before location. So again, now we have different varieties here. If you want to stress out the object, you can start with ihren Kindern here. Then, as you see, again, always comes the verb in the second place, and then the subject. If you don't start with the subject, then the subject takes the third place. Mit ihren Kindern spielen Väter häufig auf der Wiese. Again, time before location. You can stress out the location, put it at the beginning, then comes verb subject again, then comes the time, and then comes the dative at the end. You can start with the indication of time at the beginning if you want to stress it out. Continue with the verb subject, then comes the dative, and then comes the location. Now, as you see, the word order in German is quite flexible, but you can either just mix it all up the way you want to. There are certain rules you have to apply and stick to. So I would advise you, although there are different varieties and it is somewhat flexible, I would always keep the structures and the first example of each chart, because this is the one that we most of the time use in German. Later on, if you're a little bit more comfortable with the German language, you can vary it and try it in different ways. But at the moment, at the A1 level, I would always start with the subject and then the verb, because first of all, it's the easiest because it's always the same, starts always the same, and secondly, it's also the most common way to structure a sentence in German. Okay, so this is just for you to see with the German grammar, that if you want to emphasize something, you put it at the beginning, but then the word order somewhat changes. So it's just for you to see how it works in the German grammar. But I would say that you just learn really always the first structure, because this is the one that we use the most. Okay. By now you have learned quite a lot of vocabulary, I hope. Maybe you can try and form a few sentences and just to practice the word order in German. I hope you enjoyed this lesson and you learned a lot or many new things, and also hopefully many new words. And then see you in the next chapter. Bis zum nächsten Mal. Tschüss.